Welcome to this week's edition of Dugout Dish Podcast. I'm Andy Kirikides, joined by my wonderful co-host, Keith Glasser. Keith, how we doing?
Great. How are you?
Good. We got another special guest on tonight. Looking forward to having a really good conversation, but I'm going to kick it over to you for the intro here.
Yeah. Tonight we have a coach that I got to know when I was at RPI. We started. I was an assistant, and we were going down to play them at the start of the year. Really good baseball coach. Tonight we're joined by Ray Hedrick. He's in his 21st year, I believe, at Randolph Macon. He's got 457 wins at Randolph Macon. They've won the ODAC a handful of times, 18, 19, 20, and 21. 18 was one of their really good years. Regional championship, went to the World Series. Coach of the year in the state of Virginia 5 times, ODAC Coach of the Year 3 times. But in my personal opinion, one of the better coaches in all of college baseball, but even specifically at the Division III level. Ray Hedrick, we're joined by him tonight. Ray, thanks for coming. I'm super happy that you're able to join us tonight.
Well, I appreciate you guys both having me on, and it's interesting to be talking baseball right now when there's 3 inches of snow out on the ground here in Central Virginia. But I'm going to give it the best, and maybe it'll get me fired up and ready for the season, because the snow certainly isn't.
Well, we had you remember this, but in 19, my first year being the head coach, we were coming down, and we had to wash the entire weekend because you guys got like 5 inches of snow.
Yeah,
and it was like 52 and sunny in Troy, New York, which is not at all what normally happens.
Yeah, 19 was a tough year because we were having issues with our outfield drainage. You remember back in 18, we had to open the season at the Pro Park in Richmond because our field wouldn't drain. And then when we got washed against you guys in 19, we ended up opening the season at CNU in a neutral site game against Marietta because we couldn't play on our field because we kept losing games because of drainage issues. And that's been fixed. And we haven't had snow up until today for 2 years. So but this might be the year where the bottom drops out. We might have another 2019 again.
That 18 doubleheader was amazing.
Those were 2 good games. They were like 4-2 and 2-1, something like that.
We played a doubleheader. I think we played both 9-inning doubleheader games in like a total of 4 hours.
Yeah,
it was clean baseball, well pitched on both sides. Selby pitched.
Well, you had two pro guys. You had Selby and Roth. Yeah. 2 pro guys pitch in that game.
Yep.
Yeah, I was at that game.
Yep, you were.
Yep, I was
CJ, I was because both of our guys had scouts there to watch them too. They had really good years, just never got picked up, but they were really good pitchers. And CJ's like, the second guy I think is going to be, he should be good. We'll see how it shakes out. He punched like 9 in a row, and I walked in off third base box. I'm like, are we facing Max Scherzer? Like, what is going on right now? Yeah. And I come out of the dugout, and the scout was like, hey, that kid has been 95 the entire game. Yeah. I was like, oh, okay, well.
Yeah, good job by CJ on picking that one up. That was a good one for him. One of his many good ones.
Shout out to CJ Rhodes, one of a very good friend of this show, and a phenomenal baseball coach to boot. But to kind of kick it off here, just give the listeners a quick rundown of what you've done, how you got to Randolph Macon, and then we'll kick it off here.
Well, I'm a native of Springfield, Virginia. Went to high school actually in Annandale, Virginia, and then spent 2 years of college baseball at Prince George's Community College, which is in the D.C. metro area on the other side of the Wilson Bridge as you cross the Potomac River. And after I finished at PG Community College, I came down to Randolph Macon and played my final 2 years of college and got my degree from Randolph Macon. When I left Randolph Macon, I really wasn't sure what direction I wanted to go in. So I actually got into pro ball, but not in the way you and I are accustomed to talking about pro ball. I worked in a front office. And worked in the minor league, the Orioles AA affiliate in Bowie in their minor league system, and did sales and marketing and game day promotions and things of that nature. And it really wasn't what I thought it was going to be in terms of very naive. I just thought, well, I'm going to work in baseball, so I'm going to be around baseball, and it was the business side of baseball. So I didn't really have the connections on the field that I would have liked to have had or that I desired to have. I did get to meet some of the players. That's back when the Orioles had Sidney Ponson in their system, and Calvin Pickering and Ryan Miner, who sadly just recently passed away. Ryan Miner was the trivia question of the guy that replaced Cal Ripken when the streak ended. But Ryan played basketball and baseball at Oklahoma before he just decided on baseball. So, yeah, it was a lot of fun, but it wasn't what I wanted it to be. So I had a friend that was playing at Shenandoah University, and we're all very familiar with the success they've had over the last, 2 decades under Kevin Anderson. But there was a guy named Paul O'Neill who was the coach there back in 1999, and Paul was a graduate of Cox High School over in Virginia Beach and played his collegiate baseball at Appalachian State. Paul was at Shenandoah after spending time at VCU. He was on the first staff under Paul Keyes. When Paul Keyes came back from Vanderbilt and coached at VCU, it was Paul Keyes, Chris Finwood, who's now the coach at Old Dominion, and then Paul O'Neill. So Paul was at VCU with Key Dog and Finney for a couple of years before getting out on his own and coaching at Shenandoah. Not the Shenandoah that we know, very different school, very different situation at that time. But Paul was there from 1998 to 2000, I guess, maybe 97 rather, to 2000. So long story short, I had a friend of mine who was playing for him in 97, 98, and Coach O'Neill was looking for an assistant coach. I met with him my senior year in the winter of 96, early spring of 97. And again, as I mentioned, I didn't take that chance. I ended up working a job with the Orioles, as I mentioned. And when it wasn't what I thought it was going to be, I called him back up and hopped over to him in the I guess it must have been the fall of 1998. Got in with him in the fall of 1998, and then was with him in 99 and the 2000 seasons at Shenandoah. We had a really good year in 2000 at Shenandoah. Ended up losing to North Carolina Wesleyan in the conference championship. At that time, they were the defending national champions coming off the 1999 season under Charlie Long. So we had a really good year in 1999 and 2000. He got the job at UNC Pembroke. I went down with him to UNC Pembroke, Division II school, which at the time was in the Peach Belt. Now it's in I guess the Conference Carolinas. I guess it is now. They've gotten out of the Peach Belt. And I rode down the U-Haul with him to Lumberton, North Carolina, and spent 4 years at Pembroke. And then this opportunity at my alma mater came open in the summer of 2004. So I graduated in 97 and I put in for the job in the summer of 04. Got back here in the fall of 04. Was hired by an athletic director who I had connections to back in Northern Virginia in Annandale, where I grew up. His sons went to Annandale High School. His second son, Jesse, was our center fielder and a football player at Annandale, and he graduated the year before me. His third son was the year behind me, and he had been an administrator at Georgetown for 30-some-odd years. Was John Thompson, the old basketball coach's right-hand man for years back in the heyday of Georgetown basketball. So this was kind of his retirement gig. He came down here, and I ended up being his first hire in the fall of 2004. And 20 years later, here I am, still getting gray hair, and I got a daughter getting ready to graduate high school and a son who's about to turn 13. And yeah, where did time go?
I ask myself that every day. I have a 2-year-old, and I'm like, when did you turn 13? Like, this is absurd.
Yeah. And then wait until the 2-year-old turns 18.
It's going to be here before I know it. I know that much.
Yeah.
No, it's awesome. I think the one thing, and before we kind of jump off here, I think the one thing, and you and I have talked about this before, and the Division 3 is, we say it all the time on here, like, it's not 13th grade. It's super high end baseball. Like, if you want to play Division 3 baseball at this level, like, you have to be a good baseball player. But I also think too, like, the Peach Belt from a baseball standpoint, Conference Carolinas, I coach in the Gulf South, like, that baseball is legit.
Oh yeah.
Like, people are like, oh, Division 2 baseball. Like, no, man, like, these
Let me
kids
tell you that league
play baseball.
When I was in that league, I was just a piddly little 24, 25, 26-year-old assistant, whatever I was, but I'd go to league meetings with Coach O'Neill, and I'd roll in. There was Dusty Rhodes in North Florida. There was Mike Sansing at Kennesaw State. Now, these are all guys that took their programs from NAIA in some cases to Division 2, and now these guys are all Division 1. Dusty, Coach Rhodes was in North Florida. Mike Sansing was at Kennesaw State. Greg Appleton is still the coach of Columbus State. They're still in the Peach Belt. But it was intense. Kenny Thomas was the coach of USC Aiken. Aiken just built a brand new facility that was funded by Roberto Hernandez, the longtime major league closer who spent like 2 semesters at Aiken and threw a bunch of money at him and built him a great field. And it was unbelievable, that league. I mean, in the coaches meetings and everything that went into being part of that organization in that league was just intense. It was really, really intense. I was very lucky to be there. And I would argue now in some cases that the ODAC has kind of matched that level in Division III. I mean, the league that we play in the ODAC, when I first got to Macon, it was, Virginia Wesleyan was really good under Nick Booth. Kirk Kendall had spent decades at Bridgewater rolling that. And then you had some, good and okay and, average teams. But now, I mean, my goodness, we have the defending national champion out of our league, and there's Shenandoah, there's Roanoke, there's still Bridgewater, by the way, there's Hampton Sydney, like W&L, like you could go on and on. So yeah. I was very lucky to coach in the Peach Belt for sure. It prepared me to be in a league like this at the level that we are now.
Yeah.
For those of you listening, take a second and Google Dusty Rhodes if you want to learn about a legend in college baseball. I was fortunate enough to have my path cross with him when I was a player.
Not the American Dream, not the wrestler, though. Make sure you do Dusty Rhodes baseball. Otherwise, you're going to get the American Dream on there, and you're going to get very confused.
Interesting Google search nonetheless.
Yeah.
But Dusty's an absolute legend for those of you who are listening to this. You want a little baseball history. That guy he made a significant mark on college baseball and amateur baseball throughout his career. So take a second to Google that one if you want to learn a little bit of something.
Yeah, I was always I just thought North Florida was just the coolest place. Not because it was Jacksonville, but just going there and playing. It just had such an aura about it under Coach Rhodes and just the things that he did and the impact he had on so many people in his career. And, most recently he was the volunteer at Flagler, if you can believe it. He was helping out down at Flagler. Whether he's still doing that or not, I don't know. But when Pembroke was wrapping up their tenure in the Peach Belt and would go down to St. Augustine and play every other year, and that Coach Rhodes was in the dugout. And boy, what a lucky program that was. Yeah, you're absolutely right. He was one of the best I've ever been around.
It was amazing. All right, we'll kick it off. This first question we always ask everyone: how do you guys identify players at Randolph Macon to recruit?
I think like most of what I'll probably talk about tonight, Glass, relationships, people that we know in the industry, people that we trust and that we value, many of which are high school coaches, right? Having been here for 19 years, having been in the state, basically my entire life outside of the 4 years I spent in Lumberton, North Carolina. Just, people knowing people and the interesting thing about, or that you may or may not know about Virginia, is that you've got Division I baseball in Virginia, and then it's Division III with just a few junior colleges now in the mix. You do have a couple Division IIs. I don't want to overlook them, but coming from the state of North Carolina like I did, I mean, you had a whole slew of schools at all the different levels. In fact, Division III was probably the least amount of schools that were available to kids in North Carolina, because you had the UNC system Division I schools, and then you had a bunch of Division II schools. And then you had junior college ball, East, West, North, and South. And then, of course, there were the legendary North Carolina Wesleyan, Mike Fox and Tom Austin at Methodist, and those Division III programs. But in Virginia, it's the Division I schools and primarily the Division III schools outside of, again, the few junior colleges, Camp Community College, Patrick Henry Community College. Richard Bland has a program now. And then the few Division IIs, UVA Wise, Virginia State, which is an HBCU. So the point being is the kids in the state of Virginia, that for the most part, with all due respect to those other programs, it's a lot of either Division I or Division III. So knowing that those relationships that we have with high school coaches, with travel ball coaches, just people knowing people, obviously that plays a big part in us connecting with kids and getting kids on campus. We have a great location. Just north of Richmond, kind of near any and everything that you would want to have as part of your college experience, whether you like the city and the urban lifestyle. We're down in the Richmond area and the suburbs that surround Richmond, which we're in Ashland, or you like to hunt, fish, and more of the rural aspect. We'll just go 10 miles west of Ashland, or 5 miles north, and you're in a little bit more of a rural area. So I think that our location, lends itself to be able to identify kids and get kids on campus. Not hard to get kids on campus for a visit, because a lot of baseball is played in the greater Richmond area, particularly in the summer and fall months with showcase and tournaments and things of that nature. So relationships, I think, is a short answer to your question. Just having been here for as long as I have, and people knowing people, and people knowing the type of program that we try to run anyway. And so that is the first and foremost way in which we identify kids.
Yeah, I think we talk about this a lot on here, like the relationships that college coaches lean on to recruit players is probably underrated from the standpoint of how much we talk about it, but like how important it actually is for like Andy and I did a podcast that, like, the circle of trust, we called it. Like, there's a handful of people that college coaches really will lean on to really give them feedback and an honest evaluation of where that kid is and where he might fit into their program. Because I think it's, when you have those relationships, and I think it's, in the state of Virginia, I think it's a little bit more unique than probably some of the other states. New York's probably close, but like, those coaches know the style of play that you're looking for, and they know the type of program you run. And when you make that phone call, they might tell you, like, yeah, hey, he's a really good player, but I don't know if he's going to fit into your program.
Right.
And that's just as valuable having as someone who's like the same person you can call and be like, hey, what do you think? Like, listen, he's not going to show up in a showcase. You're going to watch him in the showcase. You're going to be like, nah, I don't know. But the kid can flat out play in game.
Right.
And when you have those relationships and those people like that you trust, that you can talk to about that stuff, I can't tell you how many kids I got at RPI where it was like, hey man, like, he's not going to look good in a showcase, but put him in game. Holy crap, is he going to be able to play?
That's like most of our guys at Division III. They don't look great in a showcase, but man, they can flat play.
Right.
So guys that look good in a showcase, we're probably not getting.
Right. Like, we've talked about it before, like, you can go to one of these big showcases and, you could run a 7-0 and play in the middle infield and, look just fine playing shortstop in the showcase portion and not get any balls hit to you in game and not really be able to show your ability. And, how many kids, especially at the Division III level, play better or faster than a 7-0. And like, you look at it and you're like, yeah, 7-0, like maybe you can put stick in the middle. And all of a sudden you watch, you're like, yo, this kid gets off the ball. He can throw from different arm slots. He gets to everything. He can, like, he knows how to field. Like, that stuff is so, like, that's kind of the nuance around the recruiting stuff that we talk about too. Like, it's not just always the metric numbers that, like, yeah, they get your foot in the door, right? Like, hey, you flash a 6'8" and a 90 exit velo, but like, I'll pay attention a little bit more, but I also, like, you need to play the game, and we keep talking about it because it was a gold nugget that Billy Soleno had on here. He was like, people, they'll tell me, hey, I was 95 off a tee. Like, awesome. We don't play in a carnival. Like,
Right.
What am I supposed to do with that? Like, that's great. Like, I'll watch it play, but like, you're going to be facing 95 with movement. Like, can you hit that?
Yeah. Is
Like,
it functional?
what does that mean?
Yeah.
So I digress a little bit off of it, but I think that, like, having that, the people that you can trust, because like, they're going to give you that honest evaluation of the kid, and they're around the kid a lot more. Like, I think especially in college, like, the skill set stuff, I think is, yes, there's nuance. I just said that, and I'm going to contradict myself a little bit, but the skill set stuff, when you do this long enough, like, whether or not that kid can fit into your program from a skill set standpoint. The harder part, and what you really want to get down to, is this kid going to fit in from a character standpoint? Like, is he going to be an issue, or is this a kid I'm not going to have to worry about in the classroom? He's going to be he's going to be at all the lifts. He's going to be at practice. I don't have to worry about that stuff, because those are the things that I think are super hard to pull out during the recruitment process, because everyone's on their best behavior. Like, when you have those coaches you can go to, they're, hey man, he's late to every practice. Like, he's not tough. He's not coachable. Like, okay, on to the next. And those things, like, those are just like, that's why those relationships, not just from a good player standpoint, but from like, this person knows what I'm looking for and can say like, hey man, he's not going to, you're not going to be able to coach him. And right. I think that stuff is just as valuable as like, hey, like, this kid can flat out play, and that's awesome. How much, I just touched on it, so I'll ask the question, like, how much do you guys look at metrics in the recruiting process? Like, is it something that you guys weigh? Is it something that it's like, man, we'll figure it out when you get here? Like, or like, how do you guys weigh that stuff in the recruiting process with all the data that's out there now?
You're probably talking to the wrong guy because I'm old and I'm a dinosaur. I think I don't think metrics, as we just talked about, or as you just talked about, I don't think they give a true indication of how the kid's going to be able to manage day to day. And with all that goes into small college or just college baseball. Okay. We'll say college baseball, but when I differentiate between college baseball and small college baseball, just, I know in our program, it's a lot. Yes, the baseball part's a lot. The academic progress, the fundraising that we have to do at this level to be able to go on trips and to be able to get a fourth set of uniforms, and to be able to pay for a Rapsodo, or the new one now that I raised money for this fall was the Go Route, because now we have to communicate with everybody, right? So I think for us at this level, the metrics are important, but as you are both are well aware, if a kid's got unbelievable metrics, they're not coming to Randolph Macon, more than likely, right? They're going to go. There's a number of schools, certainly in Virginia, that they could go to that are competitive, either small Division I programs or even larger Division I programs. But I think for us, it's not. I mean, we'll look at the metrics, sure. The exit velocity and the spin rates. That's more the people that help me, and the 26 and 27 and 28-year-old assistant coaches that have a better idea of those things. The ones that are talking me into getting a track man, and the ones that are talking me into getting the go route. And I'm just as happy doing touch signs, coaching third base, but no, we got to have a button where we push and it says bunt and everyone can see it, or a button that we push that shows the 6-4-3 charts, or whatever the case might be. So for me, I still like to go to a ball game, and I still like to watch a kid play. I still like to watch their how they handle the adversity in a game. I still like to see what kind of teammate they are. Now, we all know that they have to have some level of talent. It's rare that we're going to go to a game and watch the guy who's getting hit for, and hope that they join our program. But I don't. I mean, the metrics are there. I just don't. I have not gotten to the point, and I know I have to probably evolve, but I just haven't gotten to the point where that's all that matters. I think that some of the other raw, the visuals, just the basic stuff. I think that is equally as important, especially at a level like ours, when we ask so much out of our guys that has nothing to do with baseball, so that our program can function at a high level.
Yeah, I mean, that makes complete sense. And I think that most coaches will tell you that if they have an opportunity to go see a guy play multiple times, that's ideal.
Yeah.
And that the data supplements and tells a piece of the story. And that seems to be the general feedback we get from everybody, whether it's Billy Saleno at Wake Forest, or Matt Hobbs at Arkansas, or you at Macon, or Joe Reyna at Rochester, all different levels, all different types of schools. That, yeah, we'll use the data, but I want to see guys play. I want to see them compete. I want to see them compete against competition that's going to help me get a good evaluation. And, it matters. Like, to your point, the metrics do matter, but at the end of the day, I got to find out if you can play and if you're the right guy for the program.
Well, the kids want to know about the metrics, and they want to know how you're going to enhance their metrics. So that has to be part of the world of recruiting now, and the player development piece. But it's not, for me, it's not what you hang your hat on when you get a kid in here, because just like you talked about, when you're facing guys that are, changing speeds and changing, planes from a pitching standpoint, and 95, 98, 102, whatever, like it's got to be able to function. You've got to be able to, adapt to the level that you're playing, and it's got to be able to work in a game. So it's the same thing that we talk about. And, I'm going to sound like an absolute buffoon here, but, with spin rate and all these different, metrics when it comes to pitching, I tell every kid that comes on our campus, that's all well and good. And whatever route you need to take to get where you think you're good that's fine. But if you can't change speeds, you can't command the zone. I probably should have flipped that. If you can't command the zone, you can't change speeds, you can't hold runners, and you can't field your position, then you're not going to pitch here. I don't care what your spin rate is. I don't care what your metrics say. I mean, you've got to be able to function in game, and you've got to be able to get swings. You've got to be able to field your position, particularly if you're going to throw in the back end, back third of a game. And you've got to be able to hold runners, whether you're starting a game or you're closing a game. And I don't know that that's necessarily taught at the academy level all the time, but that's what's important to me. So yeah, we'll have what we can have here to develop you metrically, but if you don't do those 3 or 4 things that I just mentioned from a pitching standpoint, I don't know that you can pitch in this program. So that's kind of the balance, or at least the way that I talk about it when kids come in and ask, do you have TrackMan? Do you have Rapsodo? How do you develop your pitchers? I mean, Travis Beasley, who's now the head coach at Lynchburg, was a 36th round draft pick in my second year here at Randolph Macon. He had none of that stuff. And he got to Double-A with the Red Sox. And even Colin Selby, who made his debut in the big leagues last year. And I'm not saying I'm proud of it, but he didn't have a Rapsodo. He didn't have a TrackMan. He didn't have any of those things. He was just a big, strong, physical kid who had raw ability, and he had to figure out the academic piece, and he had to figure out the time management piece, and he needed someone who was going to be patient with him and work with him and understand his deficiencies that were not baseball related. And he needed someone who was going to help him understand what work ethic was and what time management was. And none of those things had anything related to metrics. So it's a part of the world we're in, and I know kids want it and they want to know how it's going to be used. And I'm trying to surround myself with people who are smarter than I when it comes to those things and are more passionate about those things than I am, because I know that we need that to stay relevant in the baseball world.
The running game one is the one that seems to trip kids up the most recently. I mean, I dealt with it at William and Mary. You'd have freshmen come in and it'd be like 1-7 leg lift, and they didn't understand. Like, I don't care that you were 92 with a wipeout breaking ball. Like, if anybody's on base, you can't pitch.
Right.
It's a merry-go-round.
Yeah.
And understanding how important that is, and I get that, pitching coaches have a job to do, the kind of the pitching facilities and stuff have a job to do to get a kid's better at throwing a baseball. But if you could mix in just a little bit around, how to be effective out of the stretch, and teaching a kid about looks and different sets and slide steps, whatever it might be.
Yeah,
but
tempo, just something.
Give them the tools to take that into the game.
Yeah.
Because when they get to college, I mean, I had a conversation with one of our guys who's a guy that we worked with who's on a Division I campus right now, and I talked to him probably like mid-October, and he's like, I got to figure out how to pitch from the stretch, because if I can't, I'm not gonna be able to pitch, because nobody taught me how to do it. And
right.
I'm a 1.5 and I got to figure out how to get down into a manageable range. And it's like, man, I wish that had been taught, because it's a barrier to entry when you get to college. If you can't manage a run game, you can't pitch.
Yeah. I mean, we'll spend 30 to 45 minutes, 3 to 4 days a week on holds and picks, just getting them to come set, breathe. And of course, now we have pitch clocks. So it's made it a little bit more complicated, because I was always one that said, slow the game down. The pitcher dictates the tempo with runners on base. And you don't have to, nothing is going to happen until you throw that baseball or you make a decision on where you're going to put that baseball from, pick the second, pick the first, or whatever. So I always kind of taught the opposite of just, set a tempo, slow down, slow your mind down more than anything else, and take it pitch by pitch. The pitch clock has changed that now a little bit for guys like me, but you still have to be able to vary your tempos and vary your looks, and the middle infielders have to do a good job of doing that for you. And so, yeah, it is something that we will spend multiple days a week practicing in the fall and in the spring, when it comes to holds and picks and timing and that nature, because a lot of times they'll just want to come. I mean, they won't even come set. They'll just want to roll through, and then you got balks and you got to worry about that. So, so the metrics, I know they're important, but they are something that doesn't supersede the other points that I've mentioned over the last few minutes.
No, and I think the thing to harp on, because you're not the first guy who's come on here and has talked about this, and you won't be the last. But we had Matt Hobbs on at Arkansas, and that was one of the things he talked about. Like, you can locate a fastball 50% of the time for a strike. Like, you're an option. That doesn't mean you're going to pitch. Like, now we have to talk about secondary stuff. We have to talk about swings and misses. We have to talk about being able to hold runners. we have to talk about you feel, and same thing, like if you're pitching in the back end of the game, you have to be able to field your position. It's not, the point I'm trying to make is like, it's no different at Arkansas, which is the top of the SEC,
right,
as it is at Randolph Macon, which
right.
is at the top of the ODAC in Division III. Like it's no different. All of the things are the same. It's just, where you're at. Like the things to actually get you on the field and get you the burn are always going to be the same. Like the metrics are great. Like and I'm not as well versed as it as I probably could be at 37 years old, but it wasn't around for me.
Yeah.
It was a lot. It's become a lot newer over the last 7 years, probably. But if you can't hold runners, you can't pitch. If you can't field your position, you're not going to pitch.
There's no metrics for that.
No, there's not, because like
it's just athletic ability and feel.
And it's, and I think, like, not to beat the travel ball and the academies and stuff, but it's not like that stuff's not taught. And I always think about it too from an offensive standpoint. Like, it would break me with freshman catchers specifically in base running, because every tournament you go to, there's a runner for the catcher. They never run.
Right.
So when you get to college and it's like, you're talking like you're going to take 30 minutes multiple times a week to talk about base running. Like, you're going to spend 30 minutes at first base on leads and steal breaks. And like, you get the catchers out there and they take like a 2-foot lead. And it's like, what are you doing? They're like, no one ever really taught me this. It's like, okay, like, this is bare minimum stuff. Like, right. I can't put you in the game if you don't even know how to run to second base. Like, it's things like that I think, especially in the recruiting process, but as college coaches, like, that was always a big gripe of mine. Like, and it's the same thing on the pitching end, but there's so many things in this game that you have to teach. And I like, to your point, like, the Division III level, like, it's still really good baseball, but you're getting guys that need that type of development and the patience over the course of their careers in order to really get the best out of them. Like, you're right, they're not going to end up at an RPI or a Vassar where Andy was and a Randolph Macon. Like, we're going to have to actually coach that into guys. And I think that kind of gets lost a little bit on the academies and the travel ball and stuff like that, with the rules that they have in place and stuff like that, because the pitch clock is wildly different to everybody. Like,
right.
It was an adjustment for us when it went in, right? Like, they don't have a pitch clock in high school. Like, it's an adjustment for everybody. So there's a lot more that goes into this, I guess, is my point, than what we're driving at here. Andrew.
I get a question around timelines, right? Because I think this is an important one, because we talk about it all the time, because kids are like always chomping at the bit to get recruited, right? So I think I know the answer to this because I've been on your side of it, but I'd love to hear you talk about your 2025 class, where you're at, and kind of the timeline for how that happens in terms of identification, in terms of when you ultimately end up offering a kid a spot in the program, and kind of when you finish up that class.
Well, so as it relates to 2025, we are in the infancy stage, if you will, of that process. We are still tidying up our 2024 class, and it's for the most part done. There are a few kids that are still out there that have an interest in Randolph Macon and maybe waiting on a William and Mary or a Longwood or a Radford or a school like JMU, school like that to see how the spring goes. But by and large, we'll spend the spring just kind of, tidying up our 2024 class. And as we do that, then we will really start to make inroads with 2025 or that upcoming senior class. As you could probably guess, there are not a lot of current juniors that are eager and excited to commit to Division III schools. Although I think kids, by and large, are more and more eager just to commit now, because that has been the thing for the better part of the last 5 to 7 years, is how quickly can I commit without really doing your research or your homework at any level. But for us, I think that we will start making, our assistant coach was actually just making a couple calls in communications with some 2025s. And we were just talking about the importance of staying on our 24s and showing them love. And I just had a transition in coaches. So my most recent assistant just took a job in pro ball with the Royals, and new guy came in and he was ready to hop on the 25s. I said, well, your first job is to build a relationship with those 24s, because even though you didn't do a lot of legwork, they're still your guys, right? And they're still going to be part of a recruiting class that you're going to be here to coach. So again, I'm getting long-winded. I'm sorry. I think at the end of the day, we will really get going with our 25s, starting in May. That's not to say there aren't relationships in place now. That's not to say that we're not having a junior, event at a basketball game, in January, February, bringing kids in just to see what the campus environment is like. It's not to say we didn't even have a few juniors on campus in the fall for our football run, where our football team lost in the national semifinal. But by and large, it gets going in May. And of course, that summer circuit where kids are driving up and down 95 and east and west on 64, and they can stop through Randolph Macon, have a quick, meet and greet, see the campus, although it's not as thriving and as exciting as it would be during the course of an academic year. But just to see the campus, see the location, make some contact with me. And then, hopefully by the time we get to the back end of the summer and early fall, we're starting to line up those visits with admissions and financial aid and start talking about scholarships based on their transcripts. And I think that, the meat and potatoes of our 25 class will probably be, I could see us getting commitments as early as July now, which is crazy to me because, the financial aid doesn't come out until February or March of their senior year. But I think you'll have a few kids that'll want to commit early, early fall, late summer. But by and large, the meat and potatoes of our 25 in terms of getting kids, having them on campus, having them talk to financial aid, having them talk to admissions, having them get a ballpark prior to the FAFSA, what their at least academic monies and their free monies are going to look like is in that probably Labor Day to Thanksgiving timeframe.
Great answer. Love it. Yeah, I mean, I think the context around that is important because a lot of guys think that all these spots are drying up for them.
Yeah,
like the best Division III programs in the country aren't going to have their class done until this fall.
And I know. I mean, I know kids want to commit. I just think I don't want to, and it's just kind of like the portal. Like, I don't want to just get into it just to get kids to commit. Like, I want to make sure, I tell kids all the time, do your homework, make sure that you are visiting campuses. Yeah. In the summer, you get a snapshot of what a campus is like, but I don't know that I could make a decision on where I want to go to school based on an hour and a half visit to a campus in the summer. I would think, and I always encourage kids, come back, come hang out and have lunch in the dining hall. Walk around while classes are in session. Look at the environment of the campus. Look at the people that you're going to go to school with. Talk to a professor. I just think it's much more of a time commitment in terms of making the decision than kids really allow for nowadays. Because it's just, I got to commit. I need that 5 minutes, 10 minutes on Instagram of I'm blessed to announce that I've committed to school XYZ, and it's getting down to our level now, and. I think that the summer is good for building relationships. There will be some kids that will be so eager to commit, and I will say, "Are you sure?" And I always tell myself, I'm going to take. I want to do a study one time of kids who commit in July and August, and see, if those kids are able to sustain at our level for 4 years at whatever schools they commit to, because they all post now. Okay, he committed to Christopher Newport. All right, he committed to Hampton Sydney. Okay, he committed to Bridgewater, or, whatever the case may be, and just kind of follow those kids and see, how many of them actually last for 4 years. For me, I think the fall is an important time to in some cases wrap up. Maybe not the initial visit, but at least have a second or third visit and kind of wrap up the recruiting process and hopefully get a commitment out of them.
When you're just kind of a follow on to the timeline piece, I think we usually ask this on the flip side of this. We ask about the red flags, but I want to talk about more because we had a former Marine who's now the director of player development at Jacksonville State on, and he had an awesome term called green flags.
Okay.
When you're going to watch a guy, right, and you're there, you're dialed in on a specific player, you're just watching an event in general. What are the things that kids do that get your attention, that make you feel about like that guy might be a fit for us?
That's funny because that's when I'm trying to teach my 13-year-old, soon to be 13-year-old son right now about the importance of coachability and being a good teammate. I think those are the two things that really stand out to me. And again, we all agree as coaches, as baseball men on this call, talent does play a factor, right? I mean, if we're going to have success at a high level, we need to have talented players around us. But to your question directly, watching kids, just how they approach the game, how they play the game. I tell my son this all the time. You never know who's watching, but We know the failures that come with playing baseball, the mistakes that can be made consistently in a baseball game, whether they be in at bats, whether they be on the mound, in terms of, your ability to, just command pitches, or of course, defensively if you make mistakes. But to me, it's how a kid manages himself, how a kid plays the game, how a kid responds to adversity. All those things I think are important to me. And of course, the doubles and the strike out the sides and the web gems on defense. And that's great. That's all well and good, the stolen bases, but that's not typically the game that we play in terms of battling the adversity that comes with baseball. And so, to me, the hustle. I mean, this is going to sound so old, but the way they wear their uniform. I sound like an old man now, but it's just, there's a certain way I like to see guys wear the uniform. There's a certain way I like to see them wear their eye black. Like, those are just silly things, I guess. But for me, like, just the way they present themselves, the way they play the game, the way they pick up their teammates when things maybe aren't going well for them. What happens when they, strike out with runners on second and third and 2 outs? How do they go out to their position? And then when they come back in the next half inning, when their team's on offense, how do they fit into the dugout, and where are they, and how are they supporting their teammates? Like, those are things that are very, very important to me, just knowing the challenges that come with playing a high level of college baseball. And it doesn't always go the way we want it to go. And I would like to have kids and students that can manage those failures, in a mature way more times than not. And they're kids. And just like we as adults kind of are imperfect, they certainly are going to be imperfect. But those are things to me that matter. Just the way they play the game, the way they approach the game, the way they talk to their parents, the way they engage with their parents, I think is important. I just think all those little things that I'm trying to teach my son about, as he, starts to play on a 90-foot diamond and 60-foot 6 inches. I just want, I think it's important that you're always at your best, even when statistically you may not be.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And I shout out to Anthony Silkwood for forcing us to flip that question on its head. Cause it used to be, well, tell us what pisses you off about a kid when you go watch a play. And it's like, no, let's flip it on its head. Cause it was so you used to call it, I look for green flags. I don't look for red flags.
That's awesome. That's good stuff.
Yeah. Anthony's he's impressive. He's an up and coming young coach. He's talented dude, squared away, ton of energy.
I would imagine if he was in the Marines, he's probably very squared away.
He's awesome. We enjoyed having him on. But the green flags thing, and for the kids listening, the one thing that you said that I think that a lot of parents and a lot of players don't understand is that you're paying attention to things that they're doing when they don't have a baseball in their hand.
Correct.
And the parent thing is, I think it's so important, because I think this gets back to being a good person. I think it's about showing respect for people that care about you and are invested in you. And, Keith has talked about this before, and I think it's a great point to make, is that if you're willing to treat mom and dad with a level of disrespect that makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up, what makes me think as a coach that you're going to be coachable, or you're going to react well when I tell you something's not going well?
Yeah, because it's going to get real in baseball.
Yeah,
it is going to get real. Things are not going to go well. And how are you going to manage that? How are you going to respond? And understanding the coaches are imperfect and we may not respond the best way, but how are you going to respond in return? It's such a loaded. The way that they interact with people is a good indication to me of how they're gonna have, I don't, just the way disrespecting their parents and blowing their parents off and not valuing their parents. Now, I don't mean a parent who's yelling through the fence, or a parent that's, acting inappropriately, but just a parent who genuinely cares and wants to see their kid have success and is cheering like, we would expect parents to cheer, and the interactions pregame, the interactions postgame, because that's what I know I've already said it, so I don't mean to be repetitive, but what I will ask my son after every game was, can you tell me you were coachable, and can you tell me you were a good teammate? And when he's not doing something at the level that he should be, are you being a good teammate right now? Are you being coachable? And I think that'll carry people through life. Are you a good coworker? Do you adapt to change in the professional world? Do you listen to your supervisor? I mean, we're talking specifically on an athletic field here, but I think being coachable and being a good teammate carries itself all the way through. I think that's why we're on this call now. We've had good relationships in the past, and Glass has thought of me as a good teammate and a good colleague and somebody in the business. I think it just carries on and on and on. And I mean, life is about relationships. It's how you treat people. And you guys were kind enough to pump me up and all those great accolades that our team has had, and some of the individual successes that I've had because of our team success. But at the end of the day, all I care about is whether or not people think I was a good guy. Like when I'm gone, my kids aren't going to care what kind of baseball coach I was. My kids are going to care whether or not I treated people well. And when people come to my funeral, whenever that is, I want people to look at my kids and say, "Hey, your dad was a good guy." Because I think that's what our business is about, is just relationships and treating people with respect. We don't always get along. We get mad at each other because we get competitive, but at the end, I just want to, I think valuing people is important. So watching kids and the way they interact and knowing they're 17, 18, but making sure that they treat people with respect is a big part of having a highly successful program, I believe, from a character standpoint.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the piece, I think, from the recruiting process that doesn't get talked about as much, because I think it's kind of hard to put your finger on it, but when you know, like I think when you're talking to people in this business, like they get it. And I think it's hard to kind of put into words for parents and families. But I think one of the best ways is, when you're on visits and stuff, like you're being evaluated just as much as you are when you're on the field.
Right. That's a good point.
It allows us as college coaches to really be able to get an insight. And look, we know you're on your best behavior on those visits. And sometimes those flashes, you're like, whoa, okay. And I've said this on here. I passed on a kid because the way he spoke to his mother on a visit.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, we're talking about just baseball field, but visits are the same way.
Yeah. I think that it's one of those things that is, widely, when you talk about, like, we always say, like, it's a veiled process, right? Like, we're recruiting, I'm not recruiting anymore, but like you're recruiting multiple people. So you're not necessarily showing all your cards. So, it is a little bit of a veiled process, but you're trying to figure out more about the kid and the family on visits as you take the phone calls and you get to know them. Like, you're trying to figure out whether or not they're going to fit in your program, because if you bring in somebody who's not going to be a really good fit, that's going to cause more headaches in the long run. And that's not going to be a successful recipe. It's not going to be a recipe for success is the point. My wife, she coaches Division III women's lacrosse. She always says, she's like, is the juice worth the squeeze? Like, and she's like, she asks herself all the time those questions. And, I think that those are, it's a super important piece of the recruiting aspect, because, it is every person who comes on here, and Andy and I know, like, we did it. We can talk to her blue in the face, but every person who's come on here, whether it's you, whether it's Eric Suplee or Dan Tischler or Hobbs or Sleno or Mike Leonard, like, all of them are like, we go to games and we're really looking to see how they interact with their teammates. How do they interact with umpires? How do they interact with their coaches, their parents? Like, those are things that we're looking for. And, it's not an accident that, if it's continually talked about, you have to know that those are things that coaches are going to be evaluating on just as much as is the skill point or the skill set standpoint in the recruiting process.
I think as a player, and Ray, correct me if I'm wrong, but I always felt like this, is that I'd much rather be a little bit off on the talent piece than be way off on the character piece. Because a high character kid who doesn't have a huge impact on the field, because you all have them. I mean, Division I college baseball is 40 guys on your roster. Shocking statement, but listen, 40 guys don't play. Right. So you got guys on your bench that they're simply not going to play. Like your 18th, 19th, and 20th arm, they're getting throwaway innings. Like, that's the reality of it. It's college baseball. It's ultra competitive. It's no different at your level. Like, you have guys on your roster that aren't going to play. If that kid is a high character kid, he can help you win by just being a good teammate, by being a good practice player, by being able to prepare, by being on time, like being respectful. Like, that kid helps you. But if that kid is a pain in the butt, he doesn't do the little stuff, he bitches and moans when things don't go his way, he becomes a problem. So
Right.
I think that's why coaches, and you don't get them all right, but if you're gonna miss, you wanna I'd rather miss a little bit on the ability side than the character side.
Right. Because the high character kids, even if they lack an ability, if they're coachable, they can develop
It's
potentially.
amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing how those kids usually find a way to do something that helps you win games.
Yeah.
Every program I've been in, there's a kid that he gets there and you go, you know what? It's not quite where I thought he was going to be. And you look up 18 months later or 2 years later, and somehow that kid is a rotational outfielder, or he hits against left handed pitching, or he's just a kid who finds a way to do something to help you win games. And it's generally the kid who's willing to show up every day, do the little things that matter, and be a good teammate.
And I don't know about you guys, but for me, I mean, I value the relationships I have with all of our guys, but in 19 years, I feel like the deeper and the more long lasting relationships that I've sustained with players are the guys that had minimal impact on the field. I just, because I valued them and I valued the time and effort they put into the program. And even though they may not have seen the reward statistically, they stuck it out for 4 years, and there was just a deeper appreciation both from my end and from their end of, well, thanks for staying with me, Skip. And I would, hey, thanks for putting everything you could in this program for 4 years. And I don't know. I mean, good players are good players, and they help us, compete for the championships and whatnot. But from my perspective and my experience, I feel like some of those deeper relationships and the wedding invitations and the birth announcements come from guys that, had far less opportunity to be impactful day in and day out over 4 years than a lot of the guys. Cause I feel like a lot of the guys that are impactful day in and day out over 4 years are guys that, they've got some baggage, they've got some issue. I mean, again, it's no secret, over the summer months when Colin Selby made his debut that, I did probably 3 or 4 interviews with different media outlets up in the Pittsburgh area. I mean, Colin Selby almost didn't make it back here for his junior year. I mean, just it was documented some of the struggles he had academically, and I had to manage it, and I had to work with his parents on it, and it was not easy. And there was a point where I think both his mom and then his dad was former military, and said, "Look, man, we're bringing you home." And I said, "Well, hold on a second. Let's try this one semester. I've got this person, that person who's willing to step in and help." And certainly we weren't trying to make it easy for him, but just trying to provide him as many resources as we could. And fortunately it worked out where his parents, gave us that opportunity to try one more semester in the fall of 2017. And he came in and not that school would ever be his thing, but was more focused and managed his time better and spent more time in the training room and taking care of his body. And, because his sophomore year was a disaster, and from his health and well-being and academic standpoint. And again, that's why we were where we were, both with his parents and from my perspective after the spring of 2017. But, there's an example of a guy who's, pitching in the big leagues who did not have the easiest path, and was not, I can honestly say, and he would say the same thing. It wasn't the easiest relationship to manage, because he was stuck in his ways and he was not necessarily open to doing some of the things that I wanted him to do. And, there was adversity there for sure that, may not have been there with some kids with a little bit lesser talent, like we're talking about.
Yeah. I think it's, when you more or less go through the struggles with those kids, I think, and you are sometimes with the kids that don't play a whole hell of a lot for you, right? Like you feel like it's the cliche when you get mad at your team. It's like, yeah, if I had 10 Ray Hedricks, we would win a championship every year because he shows up every day. Like and it's just the talent, like we're missing the talent piece. But if we had the energy and effort that of 10 guys that did that every day, we'd be really good. And I think that, I feel the same way. Like I had a kid who, it was a kid I recruited. The amount of times it's similar to Selby that I threw him out of practice, threatened him that his dream was over and he was never going to play for me and he was going to throw him out of the program. And I never did, because I believe that if I stuck with him, we could work through this. And he ended up graduating from RPI. He didn't play as much as he would have wanted, or I thought he had a chance of when we recruited him. But I'll never forget his senior year. It was his 5th year actually. Graduated with his degree and a master of MBA. And his mom pulled me aside and was like, "I can't thank you enough. I don't know, like he never would have got through here without you actually sticking by him and like forcing him to change." And
Yeah.
I'm forever grateful. And like it's things like that when you coach that are like that that is so much more long lasting than going to a regional and winning
100%.
the amount of games that we did. Like, yeah, it's awesome. I love that part. But like it's being able to do that stuff and legitimately have impacts on people that, far outweigh all the other stuff.
Yeah, because the championships are just momentary, and
Right.
and at the end of the day, it's the relationships that are longer lasting. And goes back to my point about when all these coaches with these great resumes and all these wins, but that no one's going to care about that at the end. It's just whether or not you were a good guy, whether you treated people with respect, and you went about it the right way.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Last question, Andy, or do you have another one?
No, I think that was
right.
a good way to close this out.
Last question, Coach. End this with everybody. What advice would you give to a family going through the recruiting process right now?
Take your time. I mean, I think there's just so much going on in the world of recruiting now. We've got this thing called the portal. And kids are jumping in there and looking for the next big thing. And they're just, when you ask this question, you're asking this of probably a high school kid, I would assume, right? Who's trying to find that right fit for a 4-year school. Don't be afraid to see the process through. You don't have to commit, in the spring of your junior year or the fall of your sophomore year. And it just give it some time. When you're going around and looking at schools, make sure that one, it has what you need academically. To me, and I'm not a studious guy. School was never my thing. It was a lot for me to finish just a bachelor's degree, right? So, having gone the 2-year route and then coming here, I certainly value what you learn in the classroom. But to me, college is mainly about time management skills and learning how to be a student, how to be an athlete, how to have a social life. So, when you're married and you've got kids and you've got a spouse that works, like we do, you're able to juggle all those things and hopefully be pretty good at time management. And the other thing that college does for you is it helps you network and relationship build and help you get to where you need to be. And it's all about people knowing people. Even though much more of it is through this form now for the kids. But so to your question, first and foremost, find a school that's going to be able to help you learn time management skills. Find a program at that school that's going to be able to help you learn how to be a successful student, to be a great athlete, and also enjoy your college experience. Does the school have what you want academically? Is it going to be able to provide postgraduate opportunities for you if and when baseball comes to an end? Go to a school that's in an area that you're comfortable with. Growing up in the Northern Virginia area, Fairfax County, Virginia, schools in the western part of Virginia off the 81, Interstate 81 were not interesting to me because they were much more rural than I was accustomed to, whether it was Winchester, Virginia or Blacksburg, Virginia, or some places in between. Like that wasn't my cup of tea. I was more interested in going to urban type of schools. So I looked at a PG community college. I looked at Catholic University. I looked at Mary Washington, which was, in Fredericksburg. I looked at schools more on the 95 corridor. Virginia Wesleyan, I didn't want to be at the beach. So I think it's also important when you're looking at a school academically to look at a school demographically and to make sure it's in an area that you're comfortable with. If and when baseball comes to an end, in whatever form or fashion it does, injury, academics, whatever the reason might be, would you be happy at that school? Because the college experience is really a 4-year experience, and I didn't get to do that because I had to go the 2-year route first. But find a school that's going to provide in other areas outside of baseball. demographically, socially, things of that nature. And then the last piece is the baseball piece. And of course, that's what is typically at the forefront for everybody when making their decision. Why is it a good baseball school? And what kind of, resources do they have from a player development standpoint? Do they have TrackMan? Do they have Rapsodo? Do they have Blast Motion? Do they have the metric stuff? Do they, where their pitching coach from? What's their hitting coach's background? How many championships do they won? What kind of trips do they go on? Who's your shoe contract with? Who's your bat contract with? And those are all exciting things. But at the end of the day, if you're not happy with what the school's going to provide for you academically, and you're not in an area that is going to fill your bucket demographically and socially, then how happy you're going to be at said institution. So my advice is take your time, do your research, in the same way coaches, do background checks and character checks and things of that nature, do the same thing on the coaches. Don't just jump because it's the flavor of the month, and because you want your 10 minutes on Instagram or Snapchat or whatever social media, whatever social media platform there is. College is a big deal, and it's college is about going from being dependent on your parents when you leave home to being independent when you graduate, and you got to make sure you have the right people in your life to get you to that point. And if you're going from school A to school B to school C, you're never gonna fill that void, and it's not going to prepare you in the way that being somewhere honestly for 4 years can. And speaking from experience, I wasn't somewhere for 4 years. I went 2 and 2, and it was what worked for me, but I never really got the social and overall college experience from it, because I had to jump from one program to another and really never made the connections like you would at a 4-year school. So, at a program or at a school for 4 years. So take it slow, relax, and make sure it's the right fit. In all three of those areas I talked about: academically, demographically, or /socially, and then athletically. That would be my advice. And I say it all the time and no one listens, but maybe the dugout dish can be my source of getting that information out.
We're preaching that from the rooftops too, because we know, having gone through it as athletes and as coaches, like, I don't identify as a Division I baseball player anymore, but I can tell you some of my most lasting friendships and the memories that I have and the people that I know, and my path to get to where I am today had a lot to do with the people that I was involved in when I was at Marist. And um, a lot of times guys are caught up in exactly what you're talking about, which is, I want to get it done quick and I want to make sure everybody knows about it. And it's funny that every single coach that we've had on there has really stressed, like, you need to go somewhere where you have a chance to grow personally, you have a chance to grow from an athletic perspective, and that piece of paper that you're going to get and the people that are going to be associated with that school are going to help you with the next stage of your life, because such a small percentage of guys get an opportunity to, one, play professional baseball, and even fewer of them get a chance to make a legitimate living, which is get to the big leagues. And it's just such a small percentage that you got to have that stuff in mind as you go through this process. So glad you're able to hammer that home for us too, because it's something that we preach, and it's always good to have it coming from somebody like yourself who's coached for 20 years and had a ton of success and has guys who have come through your program to go on as not just professional baseballs, but go out into the professional world. So,
yeah. Well, and I think, Andy, the portal is a crutch now. Well, I'll go here and then I can always fall back on that. But what kind of college experience is that? We don't do anything with the portal, and what we talked about at the very beginning of this podcast, relationships. The only way we're getting transfers in here, for example, is because you call me and say, hey, I've got a guy and I know his dad, or somebody's dad or mom or cousin graduated from Randolph Macon, or somebody maybe that in the recruiting process we didn't get, who went to school XYZ, but we had a really good relationship with them. I think there's too many people that fall back on the, well, if it doesn't work, I'll just go in the portal. Like I just is screwing our game up, and kids are losing the loyalty and the whole idea of what college is. And that's about having a great 4-year experience, surrounded by people, teammates, coaches, administrators, faculty that are invested in your success and your development. Again, taking you from being dependent on your parents when you leave home to being independent when you graduate. And so I I just think people really need to sit back and do research and really invest the time to find the right fit so it is the best experience. Because 20 years down the road, you're going to look back at it and you want to have the best memories you can and the relationships that you can from the people that invested in you over your 4 years.
Yeah, we have a multiple time guest, a good friend of ours who's come on. I think he got it when he was at Furman. The head coach told him, like, if he's not happy standing in the center of campus, he's not going to be happy playing shortstop either.
Right.
And that's true. Like, you have to take into account more than just the baseball aspect when you're trying to find the right fit from a college standpoint when you make that decision, because ultimately you want to say yes once, or you know what I mean? Like, you don't want to, you're going to say no more often than you're going to say yes in this process. And hopefully it's once, and maybe it's like, in your case, it's twice. Like, you went and played JUCO and then you went somewhere else like that. There, you say,
well, I did that to myself.
Sure.
I didn't do
like there's an instance where you say yes twice, but by and large, like, you're going to want to say yes once, find the right fit and spend the time there, because it's, everything you hit on is exactly what needs to be thought about when you're going through the recruitment process. It's not just a baseball decision. It's a 4-year decision. It's a lifetime decision. And it's more goes into it than just playing baseball, because you're going to be asked to do more than just do baseball when you're at school.
Well, and that's, I'm kind of corny about it when kids are here, but essentially you're getting married. You're going into a committed relationship for 4 years. And, when you're going through a recruiting process, you're dating. So everything I say is nice and everything you say is nice, and we all like each other. And then we get on campus and we're together every day. And just like when you're married, you're like, man, you are annoying, and now you're accountable to somebody else. And now you have to, listen to somebody else and value what somebody else says, and they get on your nerves. And like, it is, very few people, I didn't, but, very few people go on one date and get married, and say, that's the one for me. Like, no, you got to invest time. You got to go on a lot of dates, and you got to make sure that person is someone that you're going to enjoy being around for 4 years, because when you're there, it's not easy. All the things that we ask our students to do that have nothing to do with baseball, especially at Division III, like I mentioned an hour ago, the fundraising and the community service and the academic. We don't have a strength coach. We don't have, we have an advancement office, but I lead the fundraising. We're the field crew. I'm the equipment manager. It's just like we are constantly in each other's lives at this level, and it, like a marriage, can get taxing. It can get annoying. It can get frustrating. And so, you got to make sure that you're investing in some place and someone who is going to be thick and thin, the one that's going to stand by you and help you get to where you need to be from an independent, standpoint. And when you graduate. So I know it's kind of cheesy, but that's what I talk to recruits about all the time. I said, we're going to be married. For 4 years, we're going to be in a relationship, and it's going to be taxing on you. And you're going to get frustrated with me, and I'm going to get frustrated with you. And how do we overcome those frustrations? Well, we talk about them, and we sit down and have those uncomfortable conversations, just like a husband and wife have uncomfortable conversations when, things aren't going well or where they're frustrated with each other. And that's sometimes harder for 18 to 22-year-olds to grasp, because, it's, for whatever reason, they're not prepared, from a maturity standpoint. A lot of them aren't at that level, but, you hope you can get them there.
Yeah.
Well said. We really appreciate your time, Ray. Absolute pleasure having you on. And
I hope your guy doesn't cut too much stuff out, because I'm a talker. So he might be like, we're cutting this, we're cutting that. I can't wait to see the finished product, because it'll probably be like 20 minutes of what I really said.
No, we let it fly, baby. We want the good conversation out there. So,
well, this is the best part of coaching. This is the best part, is these relationships. I haven't seen Glass in forever. And Andy, I apologize. I didn't even put 2 and 2 together, but I certainly remember your time at William and Mary and the success you've had in this industry. So this is what I really love about coaching this. And again, having the relationships with players, but being part of stuff like this and talking baseball and talking philosophy. And I didn't get to go to Dallas. I typically don't get to go to the convention just because of my work on the Division III committees that go into the latter part of May and June through the end of the season. So I stay home a lot, and during the ABCA, I'll go to DC next year, hopefully, because of the location. But this is my Dallas. This is my ABCA convention, getting on a call with you guys and being able to talk shop and just, create good times, around the game that we love.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You got to say hi to Johnny Martin next time you talk to him. I used to work for John. I know you guys are on the committee.
He's the best. Well, we're both off now,
Yeah.
but one of the best. I mean, there's so many great relationships through this game, but they're actually going to be practicing on their way down in early February. They're coming through and playing some teams down here. We're not playing them. We couldn't get on the match our dates up because we're going out of town. But yeah, the Mighty Bates, the Mighty Martins are going to be practicing here in Ashland. I think February 22nd. So it's a big day. I can't wait to see him.
I might have to sneak down and hug the big bear. I haven't seen him in a while.
Big
I talk
bear.
to him all the time, but I haven't seen him in a while. He's the best.
There is nothing like we would go to our NCAA meetings at the end of every season in Indianapolis before COVID, and he would get on one of those it's like scooters, that they have in the cities. And he would ride from the hotel over to the NCAA offices. Nothing like being behind that bear and watching him navigate through the traffic in Indianapolis, the sidewalks, the street. It was him. It was Frank Pericolosi from Pomona Pitzer and Paul Murphy, who's now at where's Paul? He's not at Gwinnett Mercy anymore. He's at Immaculata, I think, as the AD. But if you know Frank Pericolosi and Martin, like those two guys navigating the streets of Indianapolis on those scooters or whatever they are, getting from point A to point B was one of the highlights of my life. I think it was just awesome. But Martin is the best, just a good guy. I can't wait to see him when they come through Virginia in February.
ODAC legend.
He's something, man.
He's
something else, John Martin.
He's the best. Well, shoot. Thanks so much, Ray. Appreciate it. We'll be keeping tabs on you this spring. Obviously, best of luck and shoot, I might shoot down not too far. I might come down and check out a game. So.
Well, please do. I know Charlie Fletcher would be excited to see you. And
take care of my butt. Take care of my former player, Charlie.
He's awesome. He's done a great job just in 4 months since he's been here. He's very motivated and focused, and he's going to make our guys better. So anytime you want to come through town, we'd love to see you and love to host you here and maybe get you lunch in the dining hall or something while you're here.
Heck yeah, I could do a college lunch.
College lunch and SD's dining. It's something you can't pass up.
All right. Well,
I don't know if RPI ever did that. If we did meal exchanges back then, that sounds like a Carl Steffen thing, but maybe not.
Yeah, I think we had meals on getaway day.
Yeah. I just remember watching you guys practice in the gym. One of the first time we ever played, I don't know, we got bad weather or something. You guys had to use it as a practice day. And I listened to that practice in that little old, basketball gym. And I went, man, this guy's the real deal, Carl Steffen. Yeah, that was intense. That was awesome.
He's one of the best I've ever been around. I mean, you don't win 800 plus games, not really knowing what you're doing.
Well, like we talked about Dusty Rhodes, like Carl Steffen, man, he's awesome.
I've said this before. I was fortunate. I came up in this game. I coached. I first started with Gary Rundles, who just retired at West Alabama after 30 something years, won a ton of games. And then I worked for Coach Rossi at Siena, who just retired, was 54 years. And then I had Carl, who was the least tenured coach, and he coached for 34 years at RPI. Like I was so fortunate in this game to come up with guys that, it's cliche to say, but like they've forgotten more than I know.
I was just thinking that, yeah.
Even at this day, I've been around this game for 20 plus years as a player and a coach and doing this stuff. Like the stuff that those guys like, and just the little stuff you pick up on, especially in the recruiting end of things, like stuff you wouldn't even think of as a younger coach. And I was super blessed to be able to come up with those guys and learn as much as I did, because it's, they don't, my personal opinion, like they don't really make them like that anymore. No. And, it's, it was awesome. Like, I think we have a new crop of those guys coming through. Right. But like, I came up at a really unique time and worked with a bunch of guys that, Rossi made fun of me because I called him a dinosaur, but, just the sheer amount of years,
well, the thing that's cool about those guys, that's cool about all those guys is the longevity at their institutions. Mm-hmm. Like that's what's really cool, because that's not as common now, right? No. It's kind of the next big thing, but the longevity, and you've still got that today. Guys like Tom Austin down at Methodist.
Yep.
And now looking around the ODAC, Kirk Kendall was that way for 30 years at Bridgewater, and heck, now I'm going on my 20th year here, and Jeff Kinney, I think, is on his 21st year in Hampton City. So, you're right. There are, coaches that are coming up through that have similar type of backgrounds, in today's world. But the longevity is what's the coolest thing to me. Those guys spent decades at those schools and just locked in and made the biggest impact they could, where they they were, and that was good enough, right?
Yeah.
They didn't have to be, in front of a TV camera, and I mean, those men were as impactful as any coach in the country. It's pretty
Huh.
awesome.
I asked Rossi because him and Jack Leggett are super close because Jack coached at UVM or
Yep.
Vermont.
Right.
They came up together, and I was like, "You never really want." He's like, "I don't." He's like, "I never found the challenge." And this might be, this was 50 years ago. He's like, I didn't find it. I thought it was more of a challenge to coach at a Siena to find players and develop them and coach. Like he's like, I just always kind of looked at getting the ACC, like, how much coaching are you actually doing with a lot of those guys? Like you're getting the best players, like, and I don't know if that's the best.
Well, they're different challenges, right? Coaching at
Right.
the ACC and in Power Five is a different type of challenge. It's almost more managing egos, almost like pro ball.
Yeah.
Than where we are very much relationship based. That's what I love about Randolph Macon. Like it's not to say that Power Fives don't have relationships with their players. They certainly do, but it's so business oriented now with NILs and everything else. It's but at RPI and Randolph Macon and William and Mary and schools like that at Marist, like it's like you're invested in the kids. And yeah, you'll have some pro guys and you'll have a big leaguer here or there, but the relationships are just so much deeper because the business is limited.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of times coaches at our level, at the small college level, whether it be small Division I or Division II or Division III, get overlooked like we weren't good enough. But there are a lot of men that coach at this level that have had chances to move on. I'm sure Carl Steffen was one of them. Dusty Rhodes was probably one of them that said, nah, I'm good. I like where I'm at, and I'm going to keep impacting kids where I am. I mean, you could say that about the guy at Shenandoah right now, Kevin Anderson. And all the success he's had, and he had done the Division I thing in the past. But you could probably go through every state and every level and pick out guys that are just. I mean, how about the guy Pete Egbers from Misericordia? Like the job that guy's done. And again, I'd start naming names, I'll overlook somebody, but Ross Natoli, a Catholic, like coaches that have done excellent jobs for decades at their schools. And they're making such a positive impact relationship wise. We could keep this podcast going for hours.
Oh yeah. Well, I think the interesting thing, just like to kind of wrap it up a little bit, like Coach Rossi and Carl, every time you talked about it, they never necessarily identified as a coach first. Like they identified more as an educator. Like I'm an educator just as much as I am a coach, and probably more so because there's so much more that I'm teaching here than just the game of baseball. And I think that was such an I don't want to say refreshing, but such an interesting take to me as a younger coach of like, okay, there's a lot more that goes into this than just coaching baseball. Right. And that's where you start getting into the relationships. And like, I would talk about it all the time. Like, this isn't just all about baseball. Like, this is about life. Like, you guys need to be able to do these things when you leave here. Like, I want you to leave here and be a productive member of society and have, strong relationships and be able to, be married and have kids and understand like what that kind of looks like. And, it's in part why it's the main reason I left RPI. Like my wife got a job on the other side of the state. Like for our family, it was a better decision. And I told my guys, I was like, look, I don't expect you to like this or agree with it, but I want you to know, like, I'm making this decision because it's better for my family. And in 10, 15, 20 years, when you have kids, like, I hope you look back and you're like, I get it now. Like I would have made the same decision to move to the opposite side of the state if it bettered my family's life. And if it takes 20 years, it takes 20 years. But that was the thing that really kind of clicked with me when I worked for them was like, you're not just a coach, like you're an educator just as much as you are a coach. And I think when you have that mindset as a coach like that, it goes a long way and you develop better relationships and you can find a lot more success in what it is you're doing. And I'm not talking like, not the, you get your teeth kicked in all the time and it's like, well, my kids are doing great. Like you still want to win, but like,
the balance.
It's the balance of being able to educate the student athletes just as much as being able to coach them.
Right.
Yeah. The responsibility goes beyond the field. Like I think most coaches who are in it for the right reasons, like they'll tell you that, but it's definitely, there's different levels to it and different layers to it, depending on where you are. And I mean, I think we all talk about it, but we're all lucky. Like I've been around some awesome guys. Like Brian Murphy was just couldn't ask for a better guy to work for. Like he taught me so much about how to treat people and how to communicate. And those are the type of people you want to surround yourself with, and they're, don't get it twisted, like they want to win, period. But they also know that there's another responsibility that comes with it, which is exactly what you're talking about, right? Like the people you're around and how you treat them and how you bring them along, and just matters so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the ones that aren't going to work get weeded out, because this is a tough business to really try to last in for a long time. Like, you have to be in it for the right reasons if you're going to last as long as you do, as long as Andy and I did. And, you know, other things came up why we left, but, you know, if you're going to stick for a long time, like, you're in it for the right reasons.
Right.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. You know, good luck this spring, and we'll be following along, and hopefully Andy will get up there and watch some games.
Yeah, this was awesome. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk shop with you guys. I appreciate that. Hope it goes well for.
Heck yeah. Good luck this spring, Ray.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Thank you for listening this week. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and smash that like button for us. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, as well as Spotify. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at EMD Baseball. If you want to find out what me and Keith do to help families and players navigate the recruiting process, go ahead and check us out on emdbaseball.com. Take a few minutes to check out our new online academy. I promise you'll get some good information out of that. Thanks again for listening. Check in with you next week.